The fluorescent lights of the campus quad did not flatter Tucker. They were harsh, exposed, and unforgiving, casting a clinical glare on his already substantial form, eliminating every bead of sweat and every futile, defeated attempt to slouch into invisibility. His existence on campus was a perpetual performance of trying to disappear, a goal impossible to achieve in a body that occupied far more space than felt socially acceptable, especially within the tight, often cruel constraints of youth culture. The air on campus felt perpetually thin, judgmental, and utterly inhospitable, suffocating Tucker with a constant sense of being observed and found wanting. Being both fat and openly gay at a large state university in the Midwest felt less like an opportunity for intellectual growth and bright futures, and more like a constant, protracted act of public scrutiny and casual, corrosive cruelty. The taunts weren't always shouted. That would have been easier, a clean fight. Instead, they were the subtle, insidious acts of social exclusion that wore him down daily, stripping away his confidence layer by layer until nothing was left but raw, defensive nerve. It was the hurried closing of a friend group circle when he dared to approach a communal bench, the way the popular girls at the coffee shop would interrupt their conversation and stare pointedly at his hands, their eyes judging the caloric load of the double mocha he desperately clung to. The history TA, the one Tucker secretly crushed on, a man with sharp intellect and even sharper cheekbones, would always make a sweeping, dramatic gesture that seemed specifically designed to emphasize Tucker's difficulty fitting into the narrow, bolted-down lecture hall desk, his hip constantly pressed against the metal frame. In the dining hall, the whispers were like tiny, poisonous darts. "Santa's here early. Better get your list ready." Or "Look at the size of that plate. Saving room for seconds? He'll need a forklift." The pain was a constant, low-grade thrumming. A deep, persistent anxiety centered in his chest that never seemed to let up. He felt like a walking target, a punchline waiting to happen, perpetually out of breath from the sheer effort of existing and maintaining a smile. Finally, with the brutal end of the spring semester, the cumulative humiliation became a physical weight heavier than his actual book, driving him to flee, retreating home to his family's remote cattle ranch in the dry, unforgiving expanse of rural Colorado. He left with a single, desperate thought: I have to get out before I shatter. The journey home felt like traversing a physical and psychic boundary. The flat, manicured lawns and concrete architecture of academia gave way to rust-colored dirt, endless high desert blue sky, and the towering, protective silence of the Rockies. The air, though hot and dry, was cleaner, carrying the faint, wild scent of sagebrush and pine. But his arrival was not met with solace. It was just the same old song, amplified by the summer heat and familial familiarity. "Look who's home! Tucker, you've put on a good 30 since Christmas, haven't you? Looks like they feed you well in the big city. Better watch out, kid. You keep filling out like that, the kids will be asking you to pose for Santa photos in July," his Uncle Jim boomed, his voice echoing in the kitchen, slapping Tucker's shoulder with a painful, misplaced enthusiasm that was meant to be endearing but only felt like a cruel, familiar reprimand. His younger cousins giggled, their innocent cruelty mirroring the campus bullies, only they were wearing authentic cowboy boots. Tucker managed to force a weak smile, muttering something about a stressful semester and needing to decompress before finding refuge in the quiet, comforting gloom of the horse barn. The familiar scent of hay, dust, and old, oiled leather was the only shield he had left, a temporary sanctuary from judgment.
That's where he found Floyd. Floyd wasn't family, nor was he a typical hired hand. He was a newly engaged ranch manager, recently brought in to implement rotational grazing and modernize their worn-out 19th century equipment. He was all economy of motion, lean muscle honed by decades of outdoor work and sun. Sun-kissed skin seemed impervious to the high-altitude glare, and eyes the color of worn denim. A man who looked as though he had been carved from the surrounding landscape and perfectly weathered by it. He was quiet, efficient, and moved with an easy, innate confidence that Tucker found instantly magnetic and, ironically, terrifying. Tucker was used to men who looked like Floyd ignoring him, or worse, mocking him for his size and obvious lack of ruggedness. One scorching afternoon, the thermometer pushing past 100 degrees, Tucker was struggling violently to hoist a heavy 100-pound sack of mineral feed onto a rickety handcart. He was panting audibly and fighting off the familiar, dull, almost constant ache in his chest. Floyd stopped his work mending a bridle, the scent of leather polish mixing with the barn dust, watching Tucker's futile, desperate efforts with an unreadable, intense expression that didn't feel like pity. "You're Tucker, right? The college kid who hates dirt and loves books?" Floyd said, his voice deep, textured, and warm like whiskey poured over ice, but completely devoid of judgment. His gaze held steady, assessing only the effort, not the man. Tucker, flushed crimson, sweating profusely and near collapse, dropped the sack, defeated. The dust puffed up around his boots. He wiped his forehead with the back of a damp hand. "Yeah, Tucker. Just trying to keep out of the way and failing spectacularly at basic manual labor. I'm better with constitutional law than cattle feed, believe me." Floyd pushed off the post he was leaning against, his worn leather chaps rustling softly. He didn't offer pity, only practicality. "You're in the way of nothing. That feed's too heavy for one man to move like that anyway, especially in this heat. You ever swung a sledgehammer? The south fence line is all busted up by that flash flood last week. We're setting new anchor posts." "I've never even held a sledgehammer," I admitted, feeling the familiar spiral of inadequacy tighten around him. "I'm a political science major. My biggest tool is a laptop, Floyd. And a highlighter." "There's a first time for everything then," Floyd said simply, retrieving a heavy hammer and a pair of thick leather gloves. "Drop the feed, grab your gloves, we're headed out. We'll start small and we'll start slow." From that day on, their lives braided together, first through shared, exhausting work, then through shared, companionable silence, and finally through shared confession. Floyd didn't just teach Tucker how to mend a fence, how to settle a skittish horse, or the brutal, honest joy of physical labor. He taught him how to see past the mirror. Floyd never, not once, mentioned Tucker's size, not even indirectly. He complimented Tucker's quick wit when they debated politics during lunch breaks, his surprising resilience when he stubbornly refused to quit hammering the post despite the blisters, or the deep, booming quality of his laugh when Floyd told a particularly terrible ranch joke. He saw the heart, the passionate, intelligent, vulnerable part of Tucker beneath the discomfort and the bulk. The intimacy wasn't fast. It was built on shared effort, mutual respect, and the slow, gentle exposure of souls, like the deliberate turning of the river that carved the canyon walls. One quiet evening, after a long, back-breaking day of repairing a rusty windmill, the air cooling rapidly as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple, they sat on the porch of Floyd's small cabin, drinking lukewarm beer. The kerosene lamp cast long, golden shadows across the porch. Floyd reached over, his rough, calloused thumb lightly stroking the back of Tucker's hand where the sun had burned it. "You got good hands, Tuck. Quick hands. You learn fast, too. You're smarter than half the university professors you brag about." That night, there was a weight to the silence between them that was heavier and more thrilling than any conversation. It was the weight of unspoken desire and total, quiet acceptance. When they finally moved inside, into the small, clean space of Floyd's cabin, and Floyd began to gently coax Tucker out of his oversized, sweat-damp shirt, Tucker felt the familiar, crippling wave of shame flood him. His heart hammered in panic, louder than the cicadas outside. He instinctively tried to cover his chest and stomach, hunching forward, trying to apologize with his body for its existence, expecting rejection or revulsion, praying for the darkness to hide him. Floyd stopped him, his hands resting lightly on Tucker's shoulders, applying just enough pressure to keep him still and present in the moment. He tipped Tucker's chin up until their eyes met, his denim eyes reflecting the lamplight like twin flames of conviction, utterly focused and tender. "Look at me, Tuck," he murmured, his voice low and solemn, his thumb stroking Tucker's cheekbone. "I see you. Not just the skin you're in, but the strength you found today. Every crease, every curve, every ounce of you is fine. You are built like a comet, all bright, beautiful mass and fire, blazing a trail across the dark sky. There's nothing to hide. There's not an ounce of you I don't want to know, to memorize, to hold." He then began a slow, deliberate exploration, his hands tracing the slope of Tucker's shoulders, the breadth of his back, and finally the soft expanse of his waist and hips, with a profound, worshipful tenderness that physically banished every cruel word Tucker had ever heard. Every kiss was deep and validating, every touch an affirmation, a celebration of the body that housed the sensitive, brilliant man Floyd loved. It was in that moment, enveloped in Floyd's arms, bathed in the scent of cedar and honest sweat, that Tucker felt truly beautiful and fully accepted for the first time in his life. He was loved, wholly and without condition. But love, profound and unconditional as it was, couldn't rewrite physiology or undo years of neglect. A few weeks later, after a particularly grueling morning of branding, the smoke thick, the sun relentless, the labor intense, a severe dizzy spell hit Tucker with brutal, shocking force. The world tilted and faded as a searing pain, sharp and terrifying, shot through his chest and down his left arm. He collapsed against a fence post, fighting for air, the world spinning in nauseating shades of brown and blue. Floyd, seeing the instant panic and the terrifying gray pallor of his skin, scooped him up in a practiced, urgent move, throwing him into the old pickup and speeding toward the nearest regional clinic, 30 miles away, driving the rough ranch roads faster than Tucker thought possible.
Tucker felt the blood drain from his face, the word catastrophic echoing in the sterile, white room like a death knell. Death wasn't an abstract fear anymore. It was a deadline, a palpable, looming physical shadow cast over the happiness he'd just found with Floyd. He looked at Floyd, his eyes begging for reassurance that science and reality stubbornly refused to provide. Floyd sat beside him, his hand gripping Tucker's knees so tightly it was almost painful, a solid, grounding force in the terrifying silence. When the doctor finally stepped out to let the heavy, horrible information sink in, Tucker broke completely. The tears streamed down his face, silent and hot, soaking the rough fabric of his jeans. He felt terrified and completely helpless. "I can't lose you, Floyd," Tucker choked out, the fear paralyzing him. "I just found you. Everything good and true in my life is right here with you. If I die, if I get sick, I can't let that happen. Not now when I finally know what happiness is." Floyd pulled him into a fierce, protective hug, holding him tightly against his strong chest, smelling of dust, safety, and unwavering resolve. "You won't. I won't let you, Tuck. We won't let you." He pulled back, his eyes intensely serious, shining with unshed tears and resolute purpose. "We'll change everything. The food, the work, the discipline. We'll do it together. Every mile run, every clean meal cooked. I know how to work hard, and I know how to eat right. We're going to fix this, Tuck. We're going to make sure you're around for a long, long time. For our time, the life we're owed." He paused, that familiar, mischievous cowboy grin finally cutting through his deep worry, his eyes shining with deep, undeniable affection. "But listen to me, Tucker. You better not lose that ass, though. That's mine. I'm quite fond of that. The rest of you can whittle down, but that part is staying." The ridiculous, tender promise broke the tension, allowing a moment of desperately needed laughter. Tucker swallowed the knot of panic in his throat and found his resolve. The doctor's ultimatum and Floyd's unwavering life-or-death commitment gave him a new, vital focus. He called the university and, ignoring the stern advisor's warning about interrupting his studies, deferred his college semester. He would trade the cruelty and intellectual complacency of campus for the hard, honest labor and discipline of the ranch, and he would do it with Floyd at his side, as his partner, his coach, and his silent sentinel. The gap year that followed was the hardest, most brutal, and most profoundly rewarding time of his life. It was a rigorous regimen forged by love, discipline, and the sheer desperation to live. Their mornings began before the sun even crested the peaks, running perimeter fences with the ranch dogs, Tucker's lungs burning, his muscles screaming, but Floyd was always there, setting the pace. Days were spent cossing massive hay bales, riding hard to manage cattle across unforgiving terrain, and digging irrigation ditches. Labor that once seemed impossible now became his daily routine. Their evenings were spent in the quiet cabin where Floyd cooked clean, simple meals of lean steak, fresh vegetables, and meticulously avoided the processed sugar and saturated fats that were killing Tucker. There were tears of frustration, moments of despair where Tucker would collapse, thinking he couldn't take another step. But Floyd was always there, a firm, guiding hand on his shoulder, a shared laugh, or simply the solid, steady presence of his breath beside him at night, a silent reminder of the promise. Tucker watched his body transform in real time, shedding over 80 pounds of sheer necessity and effort. He gained definition, stamina, and felt a quiet, powerful vitality he'd never known. The physical change was immense, a visible, staggering victory, but the internal change, the absolute, rock-solid self-worth he had gained from Floyd's pure, abiding, and non-judgmental love was his true revolution. He learned that he was not only capable of change, but capable of changing his stars, not just enduring them. He was a force.
But time, rigid and unforgiving, marched on. The campus clock had only been paused, not stopped indefinitely. The day he flew back for his spring semester, the separation felt like a physical tearing, worse than any pain he'd felt from physical labor or the dizzy spells. At the airport gate, Floyd held him, his familiar scent of leather, pine, and honest sweat comforting him until the last possible second. Tucker felt like a newborn colt being pushed out into the desert alone, strong but deeply vulnerable. "Go get that future, Comet," Floyd whispered into his hair, gripping his shoulder so tightly Tucker could feel the bone. "Don't you dare hold anything back. You finished the job here, now finish the job there. We'll be waiting, right here. I've never run from a fight, and I'm not running from this, just like I promised. That's where I belong. And that's where you belong too, eventually." "You promise, Floyd?" Tucker pleaded, his voice thick with fear and devotion, clutching the front of Floyd's worn work shirt. "You promise you'll wait? I'm a cowboy, Tuck. My word is my bond. Go." Tucker plunged back into college life, lighter, sharper, and desperately focused, throwing himself into his political science studies as if his life truly depended on his GPA, which, in a way, it did. The first 6 weeks were a whirlwind of studying and daily fervent communication with Floyd, video calls where Floyd would show him the sunset from the porch, and long texts filled with, "I miss your beautiful butt." The distance was agonizing, but the certainty of Floyd's love was his anchor, the bedrock reason for his continued existence. He would work, he would finish, and he would return home to build their life together on the plains. But then, slowly, insidiously, the communication started to thin out. It was a gradual, agonizing shift, a slow drip of dread. The daily calls became every other day, then every few days. The quick, loving texts became slow, vague responses, sometimes only a single thumbs-up emoji. Floyd's voice, once so eager and present, grew strained, filled with lame, unbelievable excuses about late nights fixing equipment in town or unexpected livestock troubles in remote fields. He stopped sharing details about the ranch dogs. Tucker tried to compensate, calling more, asking more detailed questions about the ranch, desperately trying to tether Floyd to him across the state lines with the sheer force of his will, exhausting himself in the process. He was clinging to a promise made by a man who was clearly slipping away, his anchor dissolving in the current. Halfway through the semester, in the middle of a miserable gray week filled with midterms, papers, and ceaseless rain, Tucker's mom called. She was trying desperately to sound casual, but her voice was tight, filled with a nervous, protective energy that instantly betrayed her true, painful intent. "Honey, I just wanted to warn you. It's not fair for you to find out some other way, not after everything you did. Floyd's been seeing a girl from town, Bernice. She helps out down at the feed store, and she's been spending a lot of time out at the cabin. She's always here now, Tucker. They're getting serious. I think it's pretty serious, Tuck. Real serious."
The news hit him with the physical force of a sledgehammer, precisely the tool he had learned to swing with such strength. It was a clean, brutal blow. Tucker sank onto his dorm bed, the phone nearly slipping from his numbed fingers. He stared at his reflection in the window, a thinner, healthier, unrecognizable man, and felt a wave of icy, paralyzing betrayal wash over the new man he had become. He had faced down death, changed his entire life, endured the agony of separation and loneliness, all based on a cowboy's unbreakable bond. And that bond had snapped under the pressure of 300 miles and a pretty face at the feed store. The cruelest part was that the man who had promised to love him whole had chosen someone new the moment Tucker was no longer physically present to anchor him. The weight loss, the sweat, the near death, it had all been a sacrifice for a man who could not wait for the return of the life he had saved. He hadn't lost the weight just to look better for campus, he'd lost it to live longer with Floyd. The hope that had fueled his sleepless nights and his brutal study sessions evaporated instantly, replaced by a hollow, burning void that mocked his efforts and his past struggle. He spent an entire night staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the memory of Floyd's tender, accepting hands with the betrayal of his absent, distant voice. He realized he had been saved from one death only to be delivered to another. Heartbreak. He wanted to scream, to fly home, to abandon his degree, to confront Floyd and watch the light die in those denim eyes. But then he remembered the doctor's words. This is about living. He remembered the deep-seated humiliation of the past. He had done the impossible. He had saved himself. He wouldn't let this heartbreak ruin the future he had fought for. He wouldn't surrender his hard-won life, his health, or his education to grief over a broken promise. The pain was excruciating, but it was his pain, and he would use it. Tucker disconnected the call, deleted Floyd's number and all their photos, and blocked his social media, cutting the tie cleanly and ruthlessly. He stood up, went to the bathroom, and splashed cold water on his face until his skin stung, bringing him back to reality. He stepped onto the familiar college quad, unrecognizable to his old tormentors. They saw a handsome, focused young man, just another face. But now he carried the deepest pain of all, the agony of a broken promise. He missed Floyd every single day. The memory of his hand on his skin was a constant phantom limb ache. But he channeled the grief into academic fury. He forced himself back to his books, his hands shaking slightly, the hope gone, replaced by a grim, granite resolve. He vowed to pour all his energy into his degree, not waiting for Floyd, but completing the life he had sacrificed so much to save. He would finish school and prove, alone, that he was worthy of a life well lived, whether or not a cowboy was waiting. 2 long, emotionally austere years later, Tucker walked across the commencement stage, the culmination of his furious, heartbroken effort. He gripped the diploma secured in his hand and felt the healthy, disciplined life secured in his heart. He graduated with honors, a testament to the fire that betrayal had stoked within him. He felt strong, capable, and profoundly lonely, but now completely and securely emotionally armored. He rented a sensible sedan and drove the familiar miles back to the ranch, not with the eager anticipation of a lover, but with the quiet, necessary determination of a man settling a debt. A final, necessary confrontation to definitively close that chapter of his life and claim his sovereignty over his own story, bearing the ghost of the boy he used to be.
The landscape, once a backdrop for romance, was now just land, beautiful, indifferent, and vast. He pulled up to the main farmhouse. His uncle greeted him with a genuinely proud, amazed clap on the back. "Tuck, my godson, you look incredible. You got the build of a man who actually ropes cattle now. Took a picture of that boy from 3 years ago and put it on the milk carton. They'd never find him. You look like a damn model, boy." The Santa jokes were thankfully gone, replaced with honest, admiring respect that felt truly earned. Tucker avoided the main house and went straight to Floyd's cabin, the sacred space where he'd learned to love himself and then been abandoned. He didn't hesitate. He couldn't afford to. He knocked once, hard, on the worn cedar door. Floyd opened the door. He was just as Tucker remembered. The strong hands, the intense denim eyes, the sun-worn lines around his mouth, the irresistible, nostalgic scent of pine and leather. But he looked tired, older, haunted even, and there was a flicker of genuine shock and instantaneous painful regret in his eyes that Tucker had never seen before. It was the face of a man caught, and he was not alone. Just behind him, in the cozy, lamplit interior of the cabin, setting a dinner plate on a small wooden table, was a slight, pleasant-looking woman with kind, quiet eyes and sensible braids, her posture radiating quiet, domestic permanence. Bernice. The air went thick and silent, heavy with 3 years of unspoken promises and unacknowledged, agonizing pain. Tucker, Floyd finally managed, the name a rusty, hesitant sound on his tongue. He stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sealed them in private, but left Bernice standing motionless, listening on the other side. "You look different. You look incredible, actually. Healthy," Tucker finished for him, his voice level, steady, and cool, betraying none of the seismic earthquake inside him. He stood tall, the product of his own fierce discipline and determination, his hands resting easily in his pockets. "I took the doctor's advice. And yours. I'm over 60 pounds lighter than when I left. My heart is strong now, Floyd. Strong enough to handle this." Floyd looked down, kicking nervously at a loose piece of wood on the porch floor, unable to meet Tucker's unwavering eyes. "Look, Tuck, about Bernice. I know I said I'd wait. I truly thought I could. I missed you so bad it hurt. But the nights get long, and the future felt so far off, and the physical presence, I needed someone here. You don't need to explain, Floyd." Tucker cut in, holding up a hand to stop the stream of flimsy excuses. The gesture was final, mature, and devoid of pleading or hysteria. The distance was too much. You needed something real, something physically present, something easy. That's what Bernice provides. No waiting, no complication, no fear of a life you don't understand. You're a cowboy. Your life is irrevocably tied to this 20-mile radius. I was a comet. Beautiful, maybe, but always moving away toward my own necessary wide world orbit. We were a beautiful disaster waiting to happen once the distance set in. Floyd finally met his eyes, a devastating mix of deep regret and pathetic self-justification etched on his face. The cowboy's word had utterly failed him. "I meant every word I said that night, Tuck. I did. I was crazy about you. I needed someone here. I'm just a rancher, and you were meant for bigger things, a wider world than this valley could ever offer. And Bernice is solid. She's here. She makes sense. That's all I can honestly say. I'm sorry, Tucker." Tucker felt the last shard of hope crumble, not into shards of agonizing pain, but hardening into a cool, impenetrable dignity he hadn't possessed 3 years ago. The heartbreak was still there, but it was wrapped in steel. "She makes sense. I guess I didn't. I just came back to say thank you, Floyd, to end this properly so I can start my life." Floyd frowned, confused by the unexpected gratitude and the lack of tears. "Thank me? For what? For breaking my word, Tuck? For loving me when I needed it most, and for being the necessary catalyst that forced me to save my life. I risked everything, my education, my peace, our relationship, to live long enough to be with you. But you know what I learned after you broke your promise? I learned that I can live without you. I can live healthy. I can finish school, graduate at the top of my class, and be this man, Floyd. The man you helped build. Yes, but who belongs only to himself now. You gave me the courage to live, and the heartbreak gave me the strength to live alone, which is a greater gift."
As Tucker took a definitive step back, turning slightly toward the stairs, Floyd reached out and grabbed his arm, pulling him back violently. The force of the movement caused the denim of their shirts to scrape together, a familiar friction. Floyd's eyes were desperate now, the regret overwhelming the defense. "Tuck, don't leave like that," Floyd pleaded, his voice cracking. "Just for the man I used to be, for the man you made me feel like." Before Tucker could protest, Floyd closed the distance, pulling him in for one last, searing, final kiss. It tasted of dust, guilt, and the devastating memory of every perfect night they had spent in that cabin. It was a kiss of farewell, of agonizing what if, a complete surrender to the past they could no longer reclaim. Tucker leaned into it for a moment, letting the flood of memory wash over him, the feeling of being utterly loved, completely seen, before the cold reality of Bernice standing 3 feet away slammed back into him. He pulled back, his own eyes burning with tears he refused to shed. "And Floyd," Tucker added, his voice low, his face inches from the man he had once planned his life around, "I kept the promise to myself,
the one you made me swear to keep. I may have lost the ass you were fond of, but I kept the heart, and it belongs entirely to me now, healthy and whole. Goodbye." He didn't wait for a reply, didn't look back at the tears he saw finally spilling onto Floyd's rough cheeks. He turned, walked purposefully to his rented car, got in, and drove away from the ranch without looking back. Tucker was leaving behind the ghost of his past, the humiliation, the pain of his broken promise, and the man who had saved his body but couldn't save his future. He was a survivor, a college graduate, and finally completely his own man, ready to face the world not with the fear of a fat gay boy, but with the quiet, hard-earned confidence of a self-made man who had won the battle for his life and claimed his own worth. The road ahead was solitary, but for the first time, it was entirely his own, charting a course for his own magnificent, wide-open future.